From the very beginning of human history, one recurring idea has fascinated scholars, theologians, and researchers across cultures. The concept that God designed time with intention, structure, and purpose. The 6,000-year prophetic timeline is one of the most debated and intriguing interpretations of biblical chronology, suggesting that human history is patterned after the seven-day creation model in Genesis. According to this viewpoint, the first 6,000 years represent the labor of humanity, the toil of the fallen world, and the unfolding of God's plan across the eras. The seventh day, echoing the Sabbath rest of God, symbolizes a millennial period of peace, restoration, and divine rest. As interest in biblical prophecy grows, and modern events appear to align with ancient predictions, more people are asking whether we are standing at the threshold of that seventh day. To understand the significance of this timeline, it is important to explore its foundations, the scriptural reasoning behind it, the calculations used by various researchers, and the implications these ideas carry for both believers and skeptics. The foundation of the 6,000-year timeline begins with the biblical statement that, with the Lord, 1,000 years are like a day. When this idea is paired with the creation account of 6 days of work followed by a day of rest, many have concluded that human history itself might follow this same prophetic pattern. Ancient Jewish writings, early Christian texts, and various church fathers held similar ideas, suggesting that the world would last 6,000 years before entering a 7,000-year period of peace. This belief is not a fringe idea restricted to a modern audience curious about the end times. It has deep historical roots, appearing in the writings of figures such as Irenaeus, Hippolytus, and various rabbis. Part of the appeal of this model is its simplicity. It draws from the rhythms of creation itself, the weekly pattern of work and rest, and the consistency of God's design observed throughout Scripture. In addition to this, the Bible's frequent use of symbolic numbers strengthens the idea that God works through numerical patterns to convey deeper truths. Beyond its theological foundation, the timeline also depends heavily on chronology. Scholars who support the 6,000-year model attempt to calculate the age of the world by examining genealogies in Genesis, historical events recorded in Scripture, and ancient historical sources. While these genealogies sometimes appear straightforward, they are presented in a style very different from modern which leads to debates about gaps or variations in lineage. Some researchers argue for a literal, continuous genealogy from Adam to Abraham, while others point out that biblical genealogies sometimes skip generations for symbolic or literary purposes. As a result, proposed timelines vary, with some placing humanity near the end of the 6th millennium, and others suggesting that the 6th mark has already passed or is still a few centuries away. Despite these variations, a large portion of researchers maintain that we are extremely close to completing 6,000 years of human history. An important aspect of the discussion involves the transition from the Old Testament era to the time of Jesus Christ. Many timelines consider the approximate birth or ministry of Christ as a major anchor point, marking the shift from the covenant under the law to the covenant of grace. If one accepts one of the popular interpretations that places Adam's creation around 4000 BC, then a straightforward calculation places humanity near the completion of the 6th millennium, right around our present century. Although this calculation is not universally agreed upon, its simplicity has made it widely popular. Some researchers refined the calculation further, using archaeological findings, ancient calendars, and even astronomical data, attempting to synchronize biblical history with known events in ancient civilizations like Egypt, Babylon, and Persia. This combination of biblical interpretation and historical research creates an appealing blend of faith and technical analysis that draws the interest of both believers and secular historians. As the discussion deepens, many people begin to compare current global events with biblical prophecies. They note the acceleration of technological advancement, the rise in geopolitical conflicts, moral shifts, natural disasters, and movements within Israel. These developments often fuel speculation that we may indeed be entering a transitional period that matches the prophetic pattern. However, part of the strength of this topic lies in how it encourages viewers to study the Scriptures more deeply, rather than simply relying on headlines. The prophetic books of Daniel and Revelation, alongside Jesus' teachings about the end of the age, become essential components of analysis. These texts describe spiritual, political, and environmental upheavals that would intensify as the end approaches. A 6,000-year model contributes to the sense that all these indicators are converging, forming a cohesive narrative in which time, prophecy, and global conditions align. At a technical level, the 6,000-year timeline stands out because it functions almost like a prophetic countdown. Unlike symbolic interpretations that rely heavily on metaphor, this model uses measurable time intervals, genealogical records, and historical anchors. This gives it a more tangible, calculable feel, which makes it attractive to viewers who appreciate research-based explanations. It feels like a bridge between spiritual revelation and empirical investigation. Some supporters also highlight the precision of biblical chronologies when they are interpreted carefully. They point out that events such as the timing of the Exodus, the reigns of various kings, the exile in Babylon, and the reconstruction of Jerusalem follow patterns that are not random but intentional. These patterns give weight to the idea that God has structured the flow of history, much like the rhythm of a prophetic clock. Even those who approach the Bible from a literary or historical perspective often find this level of structure fascinating. Another key feature of the timeline is its reliance on cycles. Scripture frequently uses cycles of years such as sevens, Sabbaths, jubilees, and prophetic weeks. These cycles provide additional layers of meaning to the 6,000-year model. For example, the concept of a jubilee, which occurs every 50 years in the biblical law, symbolizes forgiveness, release, and restoration. Some researchers link the Jubilee cycle to major world events, suggesting that major shifts in history follow patterns related to these cycles. When these cycles are placed alongside the 6,000-year timeline, they appear to reinforce the idea that God organizes time with precision and purpose. Furthermore, many prophecies in Daniel revolve around numerical patterns such as the 70 weeks prophecy. These numbers are interpreted by many as symbolic of longer periods that correspond to actual historical events with astonishing accuracy. When these elements are combined, the timeline takes on a multi-layered structure, both simple and deeply complex, appealing to people who appreciate both spiritual symbolism and logical analysis. The design elements of the timeline also contribute to its popularity. Visually, many presentations of the timeline depict history as a horizontal progression from creation to the present day, divided into eras and major events such as the flood, the patriarchs, the kingdoms, the exile, the coming of Christ, and the church age. This design allows viewers to see the continuity of biblical history at a glance. It makes ancient events feel connected rather than fragmented. Some timelines incorporate color categories or symbolic markers that differentiate covenants, empires, or spiritual eras. Others use circles, cycles, or layered charts that represent overlapping prophetic time. This visual clarity is part of the unique selling point of the model. It transforms abstract theological concepts into understandable, organized visuals that make the subject more accessible. In a world saturated with digital media, infographics and timeline charts help the narrative come alive, making it easier for viewers to engage with complex ideas. Another aspect that draws attention is the debate surrounding this model. Critics argue that the timeline is too simplistic or that it depends on uncertain genealogical assumptions. Some point out the discrepancies between different ancient manuscripts or variations in chronological traditions. However, these critiques often fuel even more interest in the topic. Viewers are drawn to debates that challenge their thinking, and many appreciate the chance to explore alternative viewpoints. The ongoing discussion also highlights an important point. The purpose of the timeline is not merely to predict dates, but to encourage deeper reflection on the unfolding of God's plan. This is what makes the timeline engaging both intellectually and spiritually. It brings together biblical study, historical analysis, eschatological curiosity, and personal reflection. Beyond the academic and theological dimensions, the timeline has a powerful emotional and spiritual impact. The idea that we might be living near the close of the 6th millennium transforms world events into something more meaningful. It gives a sense of urgency to spiritual life, prompting viewers to consider where humanity stands in relation to God's plan. For many, this framework creates a blend of anticipation, hope, and introspection. It encourages a deeper understanding of the Bible and a heightened awareness of world events. It invites viewers to think about purpose, destiny, and the role of divine timing in their own lives. A crucial part of the timeline's appeal is that it connects personal faith to the grand narrative of history. It reminds viewers that the story of humanity is not random but guided by divine intention. Whether one views the timeline as literal, symbolic, or somewhere in between, it provides a powerful lens through which to see the unfolding of Scripture across millennia. The question of whether we are entering God's seventh day becomes not just a prophetic inquiry but a personal one. It raises questions about readiness, understanding, and alignment with God's purposes. On a performance level, the timeline serves as a remarkable teaching tool. It simplifies massive amounts of biblical history, making it easier to grasp the progression of God's plan. It acts as a reference point for studying prophecy, connecting verses that might seem unrelated at first glance. It helps organize information that can otherwise feel overwhelming, especially for those new to biblical studies. The way it highlights patterns and parallels across Scripture enhances the viewer's appreciation of the Bible's structure. It encourages analytical thinking while nurturing spiritual curiosity, making it a balanced educational resource. Another performance aspect worth noting is how the timeline adapts across platforms. It performs well in video explanations, study guides, sermons, and digital illustrations. Its adaptability makes it one of the most versatile prophetic models. It can be presented through animated sequences, documentary-style narrations, or simple voiceover explanations accompanied by visuals. Its clear structure makes it accessible for a global audience, regardless of background or level of biblical knowledge. In terms of unique selling points, the 6,000-year prophetic timeline stands out because it offers a blend of simplicity and depth. It provides a clear structure that is easy to understand, while also opening the door to deeper research and interpretation. It bridges the gap between ancient prophecy and modern history. It appeals to those who like numbers, patterns, and calculations, as well as to those who prefer narrative and symbolic meaning. It gives viewers a sense of being part of a larger story unfolding across thousands of years. This combination of accessibility and profound meaning is a rare quality, making the timeline both intriguing and memorable. Another unique point is its universality. Although rooted in biblical tradition, the concept of a divine timeline resonates with people from various backgrounds. Many cultures have cyclical views of history, and the idea of eras or ages is not unique to Christianity. This broad appeal enhances the timeline's reach, making it a subject that sparks conversation beyond religious circles. It is also adaptable to different theological perspectives. Some view the seventh day as symbolic of Christ's return, others as the millennial kingdom, and others as a spiritual era. This flexibility allows the model to be explored from multiple viewpoints without losing its core structure. Furthermore, the timeline appeals to people who feel that modern events are unfolding at an unprecedented pace. With rapid technological change, global instability, and dramatic social shifts, many sense that history is accelerating. The timeline offers a framework that helps explain this acceleration in light of biblical prophecy. It gives a sense of coherence to the chaos, providing a foundation for reflection and preparation rather than fear or confusion. Another important feature is how the timeline highlights the continuity of Scripture. It shows how the events of Genesis connect to the prophecies of Revelation. It ties the patriarchs to the apostles, the Garden of Eden to the returning king. It reinforces the idea that the Bible is not a collection of disconnected stories but a single, unified revelation unfolding across the ages. This sense of continuity deepens the viewer's appreciation of Scripture and strengthens their understanding of God's overarching plan. As more people explore this timeline, many find themselves motivated to re-examine their spiritual lives. The idea of approaching a major prophetic milestone encourages reflection on faith, purpose, and priorities. It pushes viewers to think about their relationship with God and the world around them. It prompts a desire to understand the times, to seek wisdom, and to live with intention. For many, the timeline becomes a tool for personal growth, as much as a subject of theological curiosity. Overall, the exploration of the 6,000-year prophetic timeline offers a compelling blend of ancient wisdom, scriptural analysis, historical investigation, and spiritual reflection. It transforms biblical chronology into an engaging narrative that connects the past, present, and possible future of humanity. It appeals to those who seek meaning in world events, clarity in Scripture, and insight into God's design for time itself. It is both a study of history and a contemplation of destiny, inviting viewers to consider where they stand in the grand unfolding story of creation, redemption, and divine purpose.